Hi guys, we're back again. Got no camera today, but that's no problem because we're going to turn the whole thing over to Harry, and he's going to do his presentation on the number 7 that we spoke about yesterday when we did our podcast. Which, if you've seen my last upload, we couldn't upload it to YouTube. So there's a link in the description. You can head over there and watch it. So over to you, Harry. Welcome, my friend. How are you?
Hey, good. Unfortunately, that podcast yesterday, you couldn't get it up, but hopefully we won't have the same problem today. But it's interesting the amount of censorship that everyone's talking about on the censorable platform.
Yeah, tell me about it. It's crazy. But to get a notification to say that I could only upload the video was longer than 15 minutes. I mean, it just tells you that, the information that's in there that we presented, they don't want it out. They don't want it getting out.
Yeah. I mean, we see a lot of channels with not even that many subscribers, and they're doing, 30-minute videos. So I don't know what the 15-minute minimum is or maximum is.
No idea. Yeah. All right. So do you want to take it away, mate? Do you want to get into it?
Yeah. So we'll it's not going to be that long, but and we're not going to talk about very, very intricate topics. We're going to just look at some numbers. And really what I want to talk about is if we look at numbers, how we can interpret those numbers and kind of decode how our language is and what we're really looking at when we do talk. So we're going to look at, like we said, we're going to talk about two specific numbers. Mainly the first one is going to be the number 7. And eventually we will talk about number 33 as well. But maybe a couple of years back, I ran into this chart of all the numbers and how they originate. And if you really look at how the numbers are formed, it's really just by looking at the number of angles that each of the numbers creates, the internal angles that are smaller than, or 90 degrees or smaller. So when you look at this chart, one of the questions I even asked Nigel is, do you see a number on that list from 0 to 9, if you count 0 as a number, of the one that seems to stand out the most? And I said number 7. Of all numbers, the one that looks the most suspicious is the 7, because it really looks like a little altered version of the number 1.
Yeah, and I've never seen a 7 with that little foot on it before.
Yeah, no, I've never seen that foot either. But maybe that's just the way it was originally, or at least they're telling us that.
Well, the one often has a foot on it, but not the 7, right?
I've seen the 1 with a foot, but never a 7, exactly. So we look at this 7, and it has what I call the 3 horizontal lines. And that's just a reference to the horizon. So it's got 3 of those horizontal lines that distinguish it from a number 1. And I just think that it would more fittingly belong in the first 3 positions rather than the position in the 7th slot. So anyway, for that matter, that's all that I want to talk about, the way the 7 looks. But so we'll look at the numbers, the word 7 in particular. In the Greek language, it's called epta, but after that, you really just hear 7 is used in many cases. So we'll look at one of the most important of the numbers of 7 is the chakra system. And this is akin to the chakras are like almost like the fuse box, where we'd identify the different areas, the sacral area up to the crown area. And these are almost what you would call like windows or platforms to the human stairway of ascension to source.
Okay.
The next important 7 we look at is the 7 wonders of the world. These are like majestic creations of architectural excellence. A couple examples are the Colossus of Rhodes and the Great Pyramids of Giza.
Hanging Gardens of Babylon was another one, wasn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely. And why they stop at 7, I don't know, because I could think of a lot more than just 7 great architectural wonders, but they want to stick with 7. That number is very symbolic. How about the 7 solfeggios of the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti? What happens after those 7?
Repeated, yeah, it's repeated.
Yeah. So what I can see from that is the 7 is encoding reincarnation. It's telling you that once you have gone through all the steps and you get to the final step, you're going to start over again.
Okay.
Then we can look at the 3 7s, like in the slot machines, or even in the jackpots, or even in if you add all 3 7s together, you get the blackjack, where you have an ace and a jack. So we look at 21, and we could easily say that 21 is really just encoding what might even happen this year in 2021. The Masons did a lot of hidden messages in the timing and the dates that we're in.
Just going back to the 777 and the slot machines, the other jackpot thing was the 3 bars. Do you got any thoughts on that? Bar, bar, bar.
Oh, well, you know what a bar is, right? In Hebrew, bar means sun.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It's telling you, yeah, the bartender, we talked about that once, remember?
Yeah.
The bartender is the sun in Hebrew. So is it really telling us about the sun up in the air, or the Son of God?
Well, the sun up in the air is the Son of God. In this realm, you know, everything is owned. Everything is owned, isn't it? So, you know, God would own the sun, so it would be God's son.
It definitely is. Yeah, exactly. See, the next one I have here is the 7 colors of the rainbow, which kind of just fits in with the chakra system.
Yep.
The rainbow colors. We also look at the 7 seas. They were so treacherous, these 7 seas, that you had a character named Sinbad.
Sinbad the sailor. Yeah.
A sin that is bad, right? A sin bad. We all know that the word sin is spelled S-I-N-E, which is a wave, and a wave is a cycle, and you enter and exit a realm when you're in a sine wave. So it's, again, this is encoding once again that repetition, the perpetuality of life. It's going to start all over again, and reincarnation is that system.
And of course, you've got the moon connection there again with sin.
Yep, that sin, that crescent moon is named Sin. And the moon has a different name, and for some reason it escapes me right now, but the full moon has a different name than the crescent moon of Sin.
Okay.
The next one is 70 times 7. And we see this in the biblical reference in Matthew 18. And it's not about multiplying 70 times 7 and having 490 chances of forgiveness. But the message here is you're supposed to forgive until the very end of your life.
Wow.
You brought to my attention the importance of the churches, the lampstands, and the plagues. These are the 7 churches, 7 lampstands, and the 7 plagues that all are fear-mongering teachings.
Yeah.
To make you feel like if you don't abide by the rules, the controller is going to punish you.
And we know who the controllers are now. Biblically, we know who they are.
We for sure do, yes. Then we can go down to 7 times 7, and that is equal to 49, which in many in the Hebrew tradition, it's the Jubilee year. And in that Jubilee year, every debt is forgiven. But what we've seen in this realm is that usually the debt forgiveness is reserved for the elites, by the elites, for the elites. And this is just another endless cycle of unfair practices. like the bailout of the banks. We saw that happen just a few years ago, and it just seems like the rich people help the rich people to get out of debt.
Yeah, well, the rich people are creation one, biblical creation one, as we showed in our last podcast.
Exactly. The next one is seventh heaven. This is a reference again to the word even, or even the word garden, because the Garden of Eden is the Garden of Eden. There's only two numbers in our system that even have the word even in them, and that's 7 and 11. And lo and behold, they're not even numbers, they're odd numbers.
Yeah.
The seven days that you march, that the Hebrews marched around Jericho to destroy the wall. 7 days probably were more like 7 weeks, where they surrounded the city so that they could starve them out with no supplies. But they definitely used some type of cymatic technology if that story were real.
Definitely.
7 days of the week, we're going to cover that below on the list. We have the 7-Eleven. We all know 7-Eleven can also be referenced like a 24-hour grocery store. I don't know if you have those in either England or China, but we have those here in the United States.
I've never seen one in China, and I never saw one in the UK. There's some in Australia, but not in Western Australia. But I have seen them all over Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, other Asian countries. Japan's got them, but I've never seen one in China.
Okay, so we can say that the 7-Eleven is synonymous with a gambling game called craps, where you roll the dice and you're trying to either get a 7 or 11, and there are rules to the game that I'm not going to go into. But we know that the 7 is also used to be the 7th month, not any longer. And so the 7-Eleven really is encoding September, because 7 is sept, and that's encoding 9/11 again.
Yep.
So they're telling us that they have a code that they're using, and if we're not open enough, our eyes aren't open enough, we're not going to catch it. Next one, Septuagint. We know that the Septuagint Bible is the Jewish version, or the Old Testament in Greek, and that the 70 Jewish scholars, if you want to call them that, they transcribed that Old Testament into the Greek, and I believe is purposefully just to misinterpret and to confuse the truth, so that only the chosen could really know what was really happening. And I would venture to say that it was probably more than 70 of these scholars, probably more like 72, right, as in the demonic entities that maybe King Solomon could summon.
Wow. And yeah, I mean, we know that it's been mistranslations. We've shown that ad nauseum with the word was in Genesis 1:2, plus many other examples in the Bible.
Yep, exactly. Then we have the one that always impresses me the most is the tessellated chessboard. So there are 7 moves that make on the chessboard. He starts on the second row. He's got 7 moves to make it to the other side. And if you play chess, you know that if the pawn does make it to the other side, it can regenerate to any piece that was previously captured by the other team. Yeah. So or your opponent, and of course it's the pawn, who we are, and really in this simulation game, where we respawn if we make it to the other side. Again, reincarnation is the name of this game. And of course, what is a pawn shop? A pawn shop is a place where you take valuables, they give you a loan, they hold a valuable, and then you could either go back and repay the loan and get your valuable back at a cost, like a usury interest that they tack on. And then I remember talking to you about the city on 7 hills. And spiritually, this is called Babylon, but physically, what could it be? Could it be DC? Could it be Rome? There's a big debate. I tend to still think that it's probably Rome.
Well,
But again,
DC used to be called Rome, didn't it, at one point?
it did. It did used to be called Rome. Let's see. All right, so let's go to the true numeration of the months. So if you look at, I started it off numbering them with an A and a B because it's almost like an addendum. And then if you started off with the March, April, May, all through to December is where you get months 1 through 10. So somewhere 2 months were added, and those months were January and February. Originally, I believe the first 10 months were all named after either Greek or Roman gods. Janus for January, February for February, and so on. And what ended up happening, months of July and August were changed from gods to Caesar, like Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar, who were self-proclaimed gods in their own right. So justly so, they changed their names. And then the other thing that you can look at, we can look at Janus. The reason why he was added to the beginning by, and I'll go into this deeper, but Janus was the two-faced god, both the beginning of last year and the end, the end of last year and the beginning of the next year. So that's why they chose him. And February was the god of purification. And when the body goes through purification, usually it goes through a fever if it had any kind of infirmity. So, and the word February comes from where we get our word for fever today.
Okay.
So, and then you can just look down and see the other months were named after these gods. And then if you look real close, September, November, and December are the ember months. I tried to look up what significance ember might have. I didn't find much except for just that's, the way they ended the months.
I wonder why they never used, they never called October. Maybe they did, and it just morphed into October because October, kind of.
Yeah. I know that the word in Greek for 8 is octo, so maybe it was just too strong to change it to an E. But we'll probably never know the true meaning for that. So, and then, so February was added as a double month in the beginning, but then they split it up into January and February. And we did talk a little bit about February already and Janus. So it was the Pope, the Jesuit Gregory, that eventually added the months. And then after adding them, he moved to the very beginning. And so that's why we have the 12 months. So originally we had 10 months, eventually became 12. And then I kind of started some speculation. Could the original calendar system really have been maybe a 6-day week with 5 weeks and 360 days? Or possibly could it have been maybe 7 days with 4 weeks, 28 being the days in all the months, but then having a 13th month, which would bring us to 364 days.
Yeah, but we had 10, but if we know that 2 months were added, we only had 10 months, didn't we?
Yeah. So something must have happened to necessitate adding those 2 extra months and then dividing the days into the months into smaller amounts. We don't know, but it could have something to do with how the realm was prior to the moon actually being here. So nevertheless, the entry of the moon or the on ice entity must have had some kind of effect on this 360-day year to make it a 365.
What's the just go back up, Harry.
Oh yeah.
Scroll back up again. In case anybody's wondering, that 1.5 days could always be adjusted at end of year. Okay, end of year. All right.
Yeah, we could just go to the end of the year and say we're going to have a day or a day and a quarter, or a day and a half of festivals, and then boom, you'd be right back on track instead of having this convoluted calendar system where everything is just always, well, we don't know, we have to come up with a new calendar, you know.
Okay.
Right. So after the gods or goddesses are no longer named and the emperors are added, we talked about that. The shift is obvious at the end of the 5th and 6th month, and on the 7th, it all changed. So again, the seventh month identifies where a lot of changes occurred.
Yeah.
So the next one is 7 steps in the Masonic mysteries are like a symbolic ladder. So a lot of the mystery schools always use like Jacob's ladder, all kinds of ladder systems. So on the Masonic tracing board in 1776, there's a ladder with 3 steps, and a significant revision of this usual ladder in such references. In many cases, they put 7 steps. There's of course all sorts of ladders. In the Brahmanical ladder, there are 7 steps. In the Kadash ladder, there are 7 steps. The Rosicrucian ladder, there are also 7 steps. We go to Jacob's ladder, which I already mentioned, and there's a lot of various numbers attributed to that one, but they do sometimes show 7. And the Kabbalistic ladder, that has 10 steps, but there's one really funny ladder, and it's called Tim Finnegan's ladder. It's like a story written by James Joyce, which is known to some as the ladder of misfortune.
Oh.
And it's seemingly comprised of one false step after another. And that's just saying that's symbolic of there's no beginning and there's no end.
Yeah.
Again, it's an
reincarnation.
endless
Yeah.
of reincarnation. So that ladder is just a symbol of something that just it's going to constantly happen. It never had an ending. It's not going to have a beginning. It's going to continue. And that could be because the controllers have just removed any evidence of any beginning, and they definitely aren't showing us any sign of any end.
Yeah, agree.
All right. So now that we've looked at the 7, I just got a little bit curious. I was reading and I ran into this quote by a gentleman named Jidui Krishnamurti. And it says, "It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profusely sick society."
Yeah, profoundly sick society. I've seen that. In fact, I think I used that quote in one of my books. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great quote. I started thinking about that and I thought, we definitely are living in a sick society, a society where we as human beings that have no illness are vilified to become the object of to be the enemy for these other people who are sick, and we are going to be imposing our health on their illness.
Yep.
This is not fair. So when I read that, I thought words imply that silence, which is the form of license in classification. So I'm gonna use a classification here, and I'm gonna show how words like a license are intended to silence us. And I classify them in 3 different places: legality, in a hierarchical system, and maybe even in the admiralty law system.
Well, in case people haven't noticed, silence and license are literally anagrams of each other. Same
exactly.
letters.
That's why. Exactly. So when we think of silence, we think of the Miranda rights, which is that you have the right to remain silent. We see that police are the ones that administer that when they're arresting you. The remain is part of that Miranda right. And we see another legality, false flags. In many cases, we see things that happen that are not even real, like crimes that are committed, legality, but they're really not even real. We look at hierarchical systems. Title can be looked at as, do you own that property and what legal do you have to it? you have title to property.
Well, it's interesting that hierarchy, I mean, you know, we talked about the archons, monarchy, hierarchy. Mm-hmm. It's right there in your face.
Yeah. And it's both in the, not only the contract, but it's also in the nobility, which you just brought up.
Yep.
When we look at admiralty law, we also see how sex and the semen concept are all a part of that. We see the word inter, that also has all these words all have gematria of 33, by the way. And we're going to look at that on the next page. Even the word inter, which we use in the word intercourse, which has that same sex and semen connotation. And then the word decedent, which means to die, which sounds remarkably much like decadent, and only different.
The word descendant comes to mind as well there.
Yeah. So decedent is someone who is dying or dead, but decadent can mean two things. It can mean someone who is in a state of decay, or someone who is just they think the world of themselves, decadent people. So we'll look at the gematrinator. And so we see Miranda, it has a full reduction of 33. We talked about how Miranda is the right to remain silent. We see the police in a full reduction is also a 33. We see the word remain, as in remain silent, full reduction, also 33. We'll see that a false flag event, mainly things that we know aren't real, is a 33. Having title to property, or having a title in the hierarchical sense, has a reverse full reduction of 33. And the word sex has a reverse ordinal reduction of 33. We see that the word semen has a reverse full reduction of 33. Word inter, as we mentioned earlier, has a full reverse full reduction of 33. And the decedent has a full reduction of 33.
Wow.
And that pretty much concludes the number system that I was looking at. We have to be very careful when we do use words. And when we do use the words, we have to understand that they don't necessarily mean what we are saying they mean. They can also have codes that the elites use to demonstrate another meaning that they're really implying.
Yeah, well, we've talked about this ad nauseum, really, about how we assign a meaning to a word, like government, for argument's sake. I mean, it's a classic one that everybody knows. You know, we just assign what we consider to be the meaning of government. But when we break down the word government, ment is the root of mentality, which is Latin for mind, and govern means to rule or control. You know, and it's the same with Chinese. I have great fun with my students, breaking down words. Okay, what does that mean? And they'll say, they'll tell me the meaning. But then when you actually break down the word itself and translate it, there's no resemblance at all to the meaning that's been assigned to it.
Yeah, and we've seen in our previous videos that the prefix and the suffix don't even necessarily have to come from the same language. They can be a Filipino word, and one can be Latin, one can be German, and one can be Hebrew.
Yeah. Right, well, it's great. Thanks for that, Harry. I'm going to stop the recording because I don't want to get, well, let's see if it's longer than 15 minutes. So thanks for that. Stick around, and I'll talk to you in a minute. And thanks, guys. Thanks for watching. We will see you on the next one. Take care.